I'm Jesse Ventura. Stay vigilant and question more. Welcome to my world. Come along for the ride. The world according to Jesse. Today we discuss the GOP tax plan and separate fact from fiction to find out how it will affect the American people. Sit tight. The show starts now. The world according to Jesse.
Now, the Republican Party has passed two versions of its Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, one through the House and the other through the Senate. Both bills aim to cut taxes by $1.5 trillion over a decade, which makes this the largest tax cut in history. But according to the fine print, they achieve this by raising taxes by $4.5 trillion elsewhere, which also makes it the largest tax increase in history. So who gets a tax cut and who gets a tax increase? Let's take a look. The Tax Policy Center shows that middle and low-income taxpayers will get a modest tax break during the first few years, an annual average of about $1,200. But 80% of these cuts will go to the wealthiest 1% of earners. No big deal, right? Tax breaks for everyone, even if they're modest. But here's the caveat. Under the Senate version, which experts say is most likely to pass, individual provisions and deductions expire in 2025. So by 2027, 48% of American taxpayers will pay more than they currently do under the law now. Meanwhile, the wealthiest earners will enjoy a $1.5 trillion corporate tax break. They'll also get to pocket what they're currently paying in estate taxes, which will be repealed, and they'll be able to deduct dividends on money they earn abroad. Now, the list goes on, but the main point here is that these bills are designed to trickle up from the poor and middle class to the rich while masquerading as a tax cut for everyone. The reason the public is so confused about what's in these bills is because the tax code is so confusing. That's one thing we can all agree on, Governor. But I want to hear your take on these tax bills.
Well, you know, when they talk about revamping the tax system, that isn't what they did here. It's still the same system. All they did was jockey numbers around, move them here, move them there, switch this, take away this deduction, do that. If they really want to do the tax overhaul, then do what I stand for. Abolish the income tax completely and go to a national sales tax. No deductions. Everybody pays when you purchase something. And guess what? Here's the big thing about the national sales tax. You become number one because you get your money first. Right now, you're number two. The government gets your money first. You get it second. But with a national sales tax, you'd get it first, and you decide what you pay taxes on by what you buy. Now, there's a lot of things, I won't go into all the details on it, but if they truly wanted to do a tax overhaul, they would abolish the income tax and go to a national sales tax. But you'll never get them to do that because there's no way that you can cheat on a national sales tax. If you got the big lawyers and all that stuff, which all these corporations and the big spenders do, they don't pay taxes anyway, do they, Brigida?
No, they don't. All right, now there were no public hearings on the 400-plus page bills. However, the lobbying Olympics were in full swing. Every special interest group you can think of has been on Capitol Hill pushing for rules that benefit the business class. Many senators even complained that they weren't able to have the opportunity to read the legislation before they went in to vote. Why does this keep happening? It seems like that should be illegal in itself, that they can't even see the bill.
Because that's how it works. You got to remember something, Brigida. These are the Democrats and Republicans. They're in charge. They've created an entire system based on the concept of bribery. You bribe the politician, you get an audience with them. You bring your checkbook, you write the check, you pay them the money. In the private sector, you go to jail for that type of behavior. But in the public sector, it's status quo. See, how many times do I have to pound my head on the wall to the American people? As long as you continue to elect Democrats and Republicans, this is exactly what you're going to get. There aren't going to be any major changes because they're all in it together.
All right, well, we are told that the $1.5 trillion plan is going to pay for itself. But how can that possibly be true if it's also raising the deficit by at least $1 trillion, Governor?
It's not. Just like all these wars we're going to. You know, we should have a war tax so that people feel pain when we go to war. But instead, what did George W. Bush and Dick Cheney do? They put it on the credit card. That seems to be the status quo now. You do all this stuff over here, and then you charge it. And I got news for you. You hear these politicians talk about doing things for the children and the next generation. Well, what they're doing right now is slapping the next generation with more debt than they'll never get out of it. Imagine how they're going to look at their grandkids. I hope they're all still alive. And they have to look at their grandkids when they gave them the biggest screw job ever.
Well, taxes affect everyone, and this should have been a bipartisan effort, but again, it wasn't. How can we get Congress back on track to work together, or should we do what you said and just elect people who have nothing to do with either party?
That's what you got to do. You got to get these Democrats and Republicans out of office. And until the people of the United States come to that realization, they get exactly what they deserve. This is exactly what they deserve. Roy Moores, people like that. They don't, you know, notice this with the two parties. They always make decisions to benefit their party first. It isn't a decision to benefit the United States. It's a decision to benefit their party first, and they both do it. Why do you think Franken had to resign and all that? So that the Democrats now have the ammo to go after the Republicans on the moral issues. It's all done party politics. The party comes first, the people and the United States comes, and second is their donors.
Right.
The people and the country might be third or fourth.
Absolutely.
Maybe.
All right, the United Nations is now investigating extreme poverty in the United States. We are the richest country in the world, but the wealth gap keeps growing. Now, there are currently 41 million Americans who are living in poverty, so the United Nations is conducting a fact-finding mission to find out whether the American poor can enjoy fundamental human rights that are set by international law if they're unable to meet their basic living standards. Some of these rights include the pursuit of happiness, political participation, and voting freedom. Governor, do you think that the American poor are enjoying these rights?
You know, it makes me hang my head in shame that we are the richest country on the planet, and we have been for the last 100 and some years, and yet we have, what did you say, 41 million people living in poverty?
Yeah, 41 million people.
That is disgraceful. In a country like ours, when you've got all the wealth tied up to the little few, and the rest of us are supposed to get this trickle-down effect. Well, that's what this new tax plan is. It's the trickle-down all over again. Are people really that stupid? They have no memories that they tried this a decade or two ago and it didn't work? The rich people aren't going to make jobs for you. They're going to give themselves big umbrellas, so when they retire, they get hundreds of millions of dollars in benefits and a big, you know, everything they can possibly get out of it, they squeeze out of it. Do you really believe that the heads of these corporations have your best interest in mind? Because if you do, you're damn naive.
And speaking of poverty, every election year, we hear that life in America is going to get better. Do you think that life for the common American is getting better, or do you think it's going downhill?
You know, Brigitte, I never thought I'd say this in my lifetime, but I have said it now. And until they prove me different, I think the United States has already seen its best days. And I didn't think I'd ever say that. But when you look at the leadership that we get out of these two political parties and how they operate, I think we've seen our best day, and the only direction we're heading now is down or backwards.
How sad. All right, approval ratings.
I hope I'm wrong.
Me too. Approval ratings for the new tax plan, they're low among voters. Again, this shows how little the people actually matter when it comes to policymaking. You were asking if the public is so stupid they don't remember, but in this case, they didn't even have a say. So how can we get politicians to care about constituents? We keep voting for people, and they keep saying they're going to represent the people that are in their districts, and yet they fail us over and over again.
Well, there was a movement a couple decades ago, I remember it came out of Florida, called Throw the Bums Out. Do you remember that? About 20, 25 years ago, I think that appeared. Throw the bums out. That's what we need to do. Throw the bums out.
All right, it's time for a quick break, but when we return, Jesse sits down with comedian Pete Dominick to discuss why this tax plan is no laughing matter.
The world according to Jesse.
What politicians do is something we don't do. They put themselves on the line, and they get accepted or rejected. So when you want to be president, why would you want to be? Why would someone want to be president? What's it like to be president? What's it like when the phone rings at 3 in the morning? Can't be a good call. I'm interested always in the whys and the hows. And Q Larry. Question more.
Mark Twain said it's easier to fool people than to convince them they've been fooled. That could be why America is so divided now, because people have been fed fake news, paid for by corporate interests. They beat you down until you believe their fairy tales. Well, here's a story for you. It's called The Big Picture, and it's full of facts, not fiction. Question more.
Here's what people have been saying about Redacted tonight.
Give it to us.
Redacted is full-on awesome. The only show I go out of my way to watch every week. It really packs a punch. Lee Camp is the John Oliver of RT America.
You guys do have the same accent.
Hey, we are apparently better than boobs.
Nothing's better than boobs.
You see, people you've never heard of love Redacted tonight. The president of the World Bank, though, hates it.
Well, he doesn't really have any taste.
Seriously, he sent us an email.
If you want to know what's going on in your city, in your streets, never back down like Tyrell, and the truth is what you seek. To analyze, investigate from the bottom to the top. You speak your mind like Sean Stone, whether they like it or not. I got Tabitha, Miss Wallace, with the wisdom and the pearl. Between the outrage and the evidence, what's going on in this world?
Watching the hawks, watching the hawks, watching the hawks. Listen when they talk.
The world according to Jesse. Pete Dominick is a stand-up comedian and political commentator. He currently hosts a 3-hour daily talk show on Sirius XM called Stand Up with Pete Dominick. Pete joins me now from New York to talk more about the GOP tax plan. But before we get to that, Pete, thanks for coming on the show. I'm kind of awkward with you because normally I do your show and you ask me the questions, and today it's going to be the opposite. I'm going to be asking you the questions, but just so we get off on a good foot, go ahead. Anything you want to ask me first before I start asking you?
Are you less intimidated by me, being that we're not in the same room, than you normally are when we're in the same room?
Oh, I'm way less intimidated now. I mean, when I'm in the same room with you, that's a scary thing, you know. If anyone's ever done Pete's show in the room with him, he's extremely intimidating.
Exactly.
When you leave the room, you're usually shook up after you get done. And but so, yeah, I have a lot more courage now that we're not in the same room together.
That's what I would imagine. It's great to be on your show, Governor. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thanks, Pete. Let's get to it. You know, the big thing going on right now, of course, is this tax cut. They're out there, tax cuts, and it's going to be the trickle down. You know, the corporations are going to get all their taxes cut. And, of course, we need to believe that these corporate heads, they're, of course, not going to take any money, or the stockholders, they're going to pass it on to you and me, the average guy.
Right.
That's what they'll have us to believe on this. Pete, how do you feel about tax cuts and the Jobs Act? Give me your analysis. What do you see on that?
Personally, I know I'm going to benefit from it. My wife and I are doing pretty well. We're going to benefit from it. However, I'm not sure that my daughters and the next generation of Americans are going to benefit from it. So I'm, of course, against it because I'm for more the collective, the people, for my daughters, for the future than some kind of short-term financial gain. But, of course, this is just the same old class war that we've been in for a long time. This theory that a certain segment of the of elites really have gotten so many Americans to believe that if you give wealthy people more money, the rest of us are going to somehow benefit from it. And it's way up there on BS Mountain, and it always has been. But the messaging that they've used for years, for generations, to get people to buy into this theory is terrible. I think most of us make our money on the work that we do, right? The actual work that we do, the paychecks that we get. But somehow they've gotten over half of Americans to believe that they should pay more in taxes, while the people who make money while they're sleeping, right, on their investments, they should get more of their money. It's an insane proposal. It always has been. It's been debunked over and over, and no other country in the world really believes this. So it's the same song we've heard, and of course the hypocrisy with the debt and deficit that it creates is just outrageous, and it's always got to be noted anytime we're talking about this horrible, horrible plan. It's not going to help America.
Pete, you know, why is it that, let me ask you your opinion on this. Why do the American people buy into this? Don't they read history? Haven't they seen before the trickle-down don't work? You know, these wealthy guys aren't going to all of a sudden pass the savings on to you.
Right.
They're going to take what they want first and trickle down. It's ridiculous, in my opinion. Why do you think the American people or a segment of the country buys it?
Well, it's because it's been messaged by politicians and others in the media to divide us, to get ratings, to win elections, that somehow people who are wealthy are they earned it, they worked hard, that they didn't necessarily inherit it, that somehow that there's always someone that is taking your money, your hard-earned tax money, and they're sitting at home with some kind of government assistance. It's been going on for about at least 30 years since the Reagan Revolution, the myth of the welfare queen. It has, of course, to do with just looking down on the impoverished, racism, and so much more. But it's the messaging, Jesse, that's worked, like the estate tax. They don't call it the estate tax. They call it the death tax. Like somehow, if I die, my kids are going to have to pay taxes. No, that's not true on my estate. Only if I have $5.5 million. But they're enabled. They use great language and linguistics to convince people, and then they always make it seem like all of your money is being wasted by government, and people just generally don't understand what the price of civilization is. Guess what it is? It's taxes. Every one of us would like a simpler code, and every one of us would like the money to be distributed differently, but we elect people to do that, and unfortunately, they distribute the money to the people that are paying for their campaigns and not to the people who are working hard every day.
Yeah, and the other thing I like is how they always talk about, we got to stop spending, we got to stop spending, we got to stop spending. Well, what people fail to realize, spending is the gasoline that runs the engine. If you don't have spending going on, you got no economy. There has to be a certain amount of spending to make the economy work. And yet they make the people think that, oh, it's just, and to me, I'll tell you what really irks me, Pete, is the fact that all of our money goes to, I don't call it the Department of Defense anymore, I call it the Department of War. Because all of our money is going to support these wars. I'm against these wars. I've been against these wars since the Iraq War. It's cost me dearly to take that position, but I continue to take that position. We're wasting our money on these wars. We got the hurricane in Florida, you got the one in Texas, you got the fires in California. What are we spending our money over fighting wars for when we got enough stuff to fix right here?
Yeah, and there's going to be more of that. I mean, we're going to have more natural disasters. We're going to have major earthquakes for sure that are predicted. We are going to need money to help those people. But there's, you know, I once heard, Jesse, the American budget economy, or the way government spends, could best be described as an army with an insurance company. We spend the vast majority of our money, of course, on the military and then on health care, specifically Medicare and Medicaid. And all these other things that people get confused by and misled by, like foreign aid, which is 0.00 something 3 of the budget, like assistance to impoverished people, you know, the people that Jesus really wanted us to spend money on. Those are all distractions to divide us, when in fact, yeah, like you said, the military budget, and of course you have credibility on this being a veteran, the military budget is so wasteful. We don't get nearly the bang for the buck on a bullet that we do on a dry erase board for a teacher.
You know what ticks me off? All you see on TV are these private sectors, the Wounded Warrior Fund, and all this stuff for us, the private sector, to now come forward and pay for these wounded warriors when they come home. Shouldn't the government be paying for that? After all, they're the ones that sent them over there.
Well, yes,
you know,
but
they
we should
sent
be
them
paying
over
for
there.
it.
Why do they have to come to us again and say it's the private sector's job to pay for all these veterans? And don't get me wrong, I'm a veteran. But it should be the government taking care of them, not us.
But I would push back and say it is us. We are the government. We allowed these wars to occur. We allowed this to happen. We aren't supporting our veterans if we allow them to be exploited and to fight wars that they cannot win. And so we paid for 2 wars on credit cards, Iraq and Afghanistan, and every other military intervention that's not being paid for either. Less than 1% of American families are actually veterans and have veterans. They're the ones that are paying the real life cost in loss of life, in divorce, and loss of jobs, and so on. There should be a tax. There should be a cost to war. Every American should see what it is going to cost if we're going to attack another country, if we're going to invade another country. And in addition, I'd add some kind of national service element, something similar to the reserves that would be called upon when there is a natural disaster. I'd be happy to pay taxes for the brave men and women who are going to go into hurricane-hit areas and earthquake-hit areas and Puerto Rico and help those people. That's something that I think would bring this country together in a great, great way. But we allow, don't make no mistake, we allow these wars to happen because we don't see a cost. We don't see a cost in our taxes, and we don't see a cost in our lives because we don't see these wars and we don't fight these wars. It's less than 1% of Americans that see that cost. And of course, the poor people in these countries that are victims of these wars that get caught in the crossfire.
All right, Pete, we're running out of time. Last question for you. What do you propose to fix our complicated tax system? Give me Pete Dominic's tax plan. What should we be doing?
Well, it's very, very unrealistic, but you allow me to be the President of the United States. Give me the powers that this president has. I'll create a budget that will work for everybody. More realistically, but still not realistic, I would soak the rich, sir. I would soak the rich. I would also give people who are lower income payroll taxes, give them some relief on that. Remember Mitt Romney's 47% comment? There's 47% or so that don't pay in, so you can't lower their taxes. They're not paying in taxes, but you could give them some relief with payroll taxes. I'd give everybody universal health care so they could move their job and do whatever, follow their dreams. Oh, the things I would do that aren't going to happen because I'm not in charge. Not in charge with you, sir.
There you go. Well, Pete, I'll give you one to chew on. If they want true tax reform, I've been an advocate of the national sales tax since the 1990s. Abolish the entire income tax. That puts you, the citizen, as #1, and it puts the government #2. Right now, the government's #1 because they get your money first. You're #2 because you get it second. With a national sales tax, you get your money first, and you decide by what you buy. And that puts the government on a budget. They have to be on the budget to keep the economy good so they get their money. But that's it for another day to discuss that. Pete, I want to thank you very much. That's all the time we have. Be sure to check Pete out at Sirius XM Insight Channel 121. Stay tuned. The world according to Jesse.
All right, Governor, let's turn to the fans. We asked people on Twitter to weigh in. Do you think the tax plan is good for the middle class? And who do you think it'll benefit the most? That's what we asked them. Rob says it's corporate welfare. How do you respond?
I don't know if it's necessarily corporate welfare that they're getting. They're getting a massive corporate tax break. They're not on welfare. The fact of the matter is, and you know, they should bring the corporate taxes down a little bit and make us more competitive worldwide. I don't have a problem with that. But I do have a problem when the cuts for the people end in 2025 while the cuts for the corporations go on forever and ever and ever. Amen. You know, that's where the rubber hits the road. When you see what it's going to be like 5 to 10 years from now with these people, and you know none of them are going to be there anymore, so they won't get called in on the carpet. That's how they can get away with this crap.
All right, Todd says big tax breaks to the middle class result in more spending, which benefits business. Tax plans give huge cuts to businesses and hope that they toss some scraps to the employees. He says they've got it backwards.
Yeah, they do really. They've got it backwards. I agree wholeheartedly with that. Anybody that believes these corporations have your best interest in mind, are you kidding me? Do you see some of these umbrellas they give these people when they leave? I mean, in the healthcare industry, there's these CEOs leave with $20, $30 million, and we wonder why healthcare costs so much? Well, it's because we're paying off these CEOs. They're making so much money, they don't know what to do with it all. And when you got a government that gears, and you have a president that gears to that big business and for them to prosper and make big money, that's exactly. Donald Trump is not a president of the people, trust me. And those people that support him, they're going to find out the hard way.
Okay, Governor, it's time for your final thoughts on this. The tax bill eliminates personal deductions for state and local taxes, which are primary sources of public school funding, while at the same time offering tax breaks for parents who send their kids to private schools. Is this a war on public education? What do you think about it?
Oh, sure it is. It's the war so the rich guys can send their kids to private schools. They don't want their kids going to public schools. I'm so proud. When I ran for governor of Minnesota, my two opponents, Skip Humphrey and Norm Coleman, I confronted them in a debate. And I said, where do your kids go to school? I had to ask it 4 times before they admitted their kids went to private school. I could honestly sit there and say my 2 children went to public school. And public school is what we should be worrying about now. Private school is bull. If you can afford to go to private school, fine. That's up to you. But we should not be funding private schools. We should be funding public schools that affect all the public, not just the elite.
All right, that's all we have time for today. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to send us your comments on social media. Next week, we reveal why the International Criminal Court wants to investigate the United States.
Always remember, when the government lies, the truth becomes a traitor. Stay vigilant. The world according to Jesse.